time. It may not have a huge impact over the first 10 years. It could have a dramatic impact over time because of the power of compounding. And so we need to understand, for both negative reasons for people that are trying to play games and for positive reasons to show the real impact over time of meaningful reforms that are phased in over time, we need to use discounted present value dollar concepts too, so we get past that cliff effect.
You mentioned double taxation, and I want to address that subject two ways. One is the fact that Warren Buffett pays 15%, but he also pays that other section which has to do with the corporate tax as well. Now, why is it then that so many corporations are choosing to go offshore to do business? Because our tax bracket for corporations is the next to the highest in the world. That's two parts.
Yeah.
Third part is Claude Pepper. Some of you remember him. He was about 100 when he finally gave up being a senator. And Alan Greenspan worked over the Social Security program many, many years ago. And they selected a new method of determining inflation. They said, well, inflation should look like retired people's inflation, not general speaking people. So they changed the rules at that time. We've had very little increase in the Social Security cost from a use standpoint because it's now geared to seniors and what they spend on inflation. Okay? Second part of that story is then that we need to also recognize that they increased the number of years from 65 to 67 and anticipating that would continue.
Right.
Those are two questions.
Okay, all right, first, on corporate tax. We have the highest marginal corporate tax rate in the world for industrialized nations because Japan just lowered theirs. We have the highest to second highest effective rate. In my view, we need comprehensive tax reform that will make the top marginal tax rate, combined with broadening the base, no more than 25%, all right? So that includes for corporations. And we need to deal with the double taxation of dividends, okay, with regard to corporations. Secondly, with regard to Social Security, there's absolutely no question that one of the elements of Social Security reform is going to be for people below a stated age, e.g. 60 or 55. We can debate what the age would be. The eligibility for retirement is going to increase gradually over time. And the reason it's going to increase gradually over time is because we need it to for workforce growth. In 1950, we had 16 people working for every person drawing Social Security. Today, we have 3.2. We're going down to 2 to 1. That has serious implications, not just from the standpoint of expenditures, but for revenues, because people exit the workforce. And we're now in a knowledge-based economy, and our lifespans are a lot longer now, and generally people are living healthier now, if you will. So I think that, that will happen. Consumption for seniors, the basket of goods is different. It needs to be fair, it needs to be accurate, it needs to be consistently applied, but it is different, okay? Because, for example, many seniors have paid off their mortgage by the time that they've had. Most seniors are eligible for Medicare, and that's not something that you get below that. So there are differences, and and it's not perfect, but it's something that I think we have to recognize the reality. Other questions? Yes.
Yes. In terms of the interest rates, we're in a very low interest rate environment. Right. You mentioned that 1% increase in interest rates is going to add $150 billion a year.
Right.
All I've heard was the inflationary pressures of the amount of money that's in our economy, and it still hasn't materialized. How do we avoid the numerous bullets that are going to appear with interest rate increases that seem inevitable?
Well, first, we have historically low interest rates. Secondly, we have the lowest average maturity of any major sovereign nation for our debt. So that means we have huge interest rate risk. And the three big risks with regard to our projections that I showed you here are economic growth. Are we going to grow at the level that they're anticipating? Secondly, are healthcare costs going to be what they're projecting? And thirdly, interest rate risk. And what we need to do, quite frankly, is that we need to start taking some steps to put our fiscal and monetary policy in order, because both are inflationary over time. But keep in mind, right now, we've got a weak economic recovery and high high unemployment. We're trying to stave off a double-dip recession. We don't have wage-based inflation going on right now because the high unemployment and underemployment. It's more commodity-based, all right? But then that's also affected by the value of the currency. Because keep in mind, things like oil prices and gold prices and things like that are not just affected by traditional supply and demand, they're also affected by what's the dollar worth. And I don't know about you, but I just came back from Australia 2 weeks ago, and the last time I was in Australia, which is about 20 years ago, their dollar was worth about half our dollar. Now it's worth more than our dollar. And that's because they have their act together and we don't. Other questions? But we can. I mean, there is a way forward here. Yeah.
My understanding is that we give foreign aid to most of the nations on earth. If this is true, is it necessary for our survival and viability? And among these nations, there are a number of them that hate us. I'd like to know your response, please.
Well, we don't give foreign aid to most of the nations on earth. We give foreign aid to many and probably a majority of the nations on earth. And it's part of an integrated, security strategy. I mean, because the security strategy is foreign policy, it's intelligence, it's defense, it's homeland security. So it's an integrated security strategy. And clearly there are areas where we ought to be looking at whether or not we should do what we're doing now in that area. But understand the magnitude. Foreign aid is 1% of the federal budget. 1%, all right? We are out of whack. That's a sophisticated Southern term. Way, way more than that. In fact, let me give you a sense of how far out of balance we are, okay? You could pull out all troops from Iraq and Afghanistan tomorrow. You could eliminate all foreign aid tomorrow. You could eliminate all congressional earmarks tomorrow. And you could repeal all of the Bush-Obama tax cuts tomorrow. That's 15 to 20% of our problem. 15 to 20%. And right now, the longer we wait, the deeper the hole gets. Other questions? Yes, sir.
During your presentation, you mentioned the Simpson-Bowles report and indicated that if adopted, that would go a long way in helping our situation. Are there certain elements of that report, or is it the whole package?
Well, if you adopted recommendations that had the same bottom line impact, okay, basically what Simpson-Bowles proposed to do is to solve the problem with about 2 parts spending reduction and 1 part revenue, okay? So 2 parts spending, and I use the word reduction because Washington doesn't use the same words as Webster's dictionary. Cut to me means an absolute reduction. That's not what they're talking about. They're talking about reducing the rate of increase, not an absolute reduction, okay? And so you might do it a different way, but it has the same deficit impact. Now, in the case of the Restoring Fiscal Sanity report, it's actually more aggressive than Simpson-Bowles. It goes out further than Simpson-Bowles, and it includes a broader range of reforms than Simpson-Bowles. And so I would encourage you to go on our website. Check it out. I'd like to say that we can solve our problem without more revenues. It's not true because of the last 10 years. And both parties are responsible for that. The last 10 years have just been incredibly irresponsible. Yes?
Yeah, you opened the presentation with an optimistic statement, and then a couple of minutes ago you made an optimistic statement in the midst of an understandably pretty dour presentation. What are your reasons for any kind of optimism?
Well, the reason that I have some optimism is several reasons. One, the American people know that things are out of control, and they're very concerned about it, and they want something done about it. And there are elements of the American people that have started to organize themselves, all right, to be able to help increase visibility and pressure on this issue. Secondly, the president's starting to talk about it now. There's a special, a super committee that's been created, all right? I think the 2012 campaign, this is going to be a hot issue that people are going to have to focus on. Thirdly, we have, the IMF and we have others starting to express concerns about this. And, I guess the other reason is that, as Winston Churchill said, Americans tend to ultimately do the right thing